All right. Hopefully everyone got pizza. If you didn't, feel free to get up at any time. There'll be plenty of time where we'll be working on stuff in groups that you can get up and get pizza. So don't worry if you want seconds. You guys can go ahead and get more pizza. It seems like we have plenty of it. So let's go ahead and get started. Last quarter, we held a previous Google Cloud Platform introductory meeting. I get a quick raise of hands if you were here for that one last quarter, just to see who was here at previous meetings. Okay, cool. Can I get another raise of hands if you just have heard of the term of cloud computing or the Google Cloud Platform before? If you heard of any of those terms, you don't really need to know fully what it means. I get a raise of hands. Just see where we're at. Okay, so this will be a bit new for everyone, which is perfect. You guys are at the right place. We'll go through everything step by step, and then you'll give you guys some time to play around with it on your own to build your own web with the Google Cloud Platform. So let's go ahead and get into it. So this is a 2-hour workshop. If you have a class like halfway through and have to leave for every reason, that's totally understandable. Classes are important. But this will be about 2 hours or so. So we'll start off by giving a little introduction to what cloud is, Google Cloud Platform. And we'll talk about different modules within it, because eventually our goal is to build a project using all the different pieces of the Google Cloud Platform. From there, I'll talk a little bit about web crawlers, which is what we'll actually be building. If you guys really want to, the nice thing about this is a full-fledged project. So if you want to, you can even put this on your resume or something like that if you want to. And finally, once we go learn what web crawler is, we'll learn a little bit about the project, what we'll be doing, and then we'll split up into groups and actually work on that project and hopefully have something that you guys are proud of and something that you guys find interesting. So let's get into it. So what is the cloud? I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of cloud computing and cloud this, cloud that, how cloud's taking over. Well, what cloud really is, after all that jargon, is it's just computers or servers that exist somewhere remotely that you can have access to over the internet. It's pretty straightforward. Instead of doing stuff on your laptop, imagine your laptop connecting to some random warehouse in the middle of Arizona. That's basically what cloud is. And so that allows you to do a lot of different things. These large data centers can be used for storage. So if you need to storage large files that you can't locally, you could do it on the cloud or remotely in these data centers. They also are useful for computation. So for instance, if you're working on a machine learning program that requires really expensive GPUs and you don't want to buy a $15,000 computer, you can pay, $100 for a day to rent it out, something like that. So it's a lot easier for you to deploy things that you don't necessarily need. Another helpful thing is the scalability of it. So maybe one day you need access to 2 computers, but then all of a sudden your website goes viral and all of a sudden you have thousands of people flocking to your website. Well, in that case, you can hopefully easily scale it up and say, hey, instead of 2 computers today, I need 8 or however many so to keep up with the demand. So the cloud is very helpful for a lot of these different things that allow you to deploy projects and different things without you having to deal with all the maintenance of it yourself. So there's a lot of different pieces of different cloud platforms, and these will be called modules. So think of virtual machines. So you can access virtual machines in the Google Cloud Platform. That's called the Compute Engine. That's an example of a module. We covered a lot of different modules in the introductory workshop. If you want to check that out, come talk to me afterwards and I can show you the slides and little different workshops we played around with that you can kind of take home and play with. The 2 main ones that we'll be focusing on today are Google Cloud Functions and Google Cloud Pub Sub. So let's go quickly into that. So has everyone here heard of a function or method in regular programming? Hey, raise a hand if there's something that you've heard of before. All right, hopefully everyone here has heard of or coded up a function. Well, cloud functions work pretty much identically to a regular function, right? You have a definition, say, hey, anytime someone calls this function, I will do some task with these given parameters and output something. And these cloud functions do that same thing. They have a single purpose. So you put in some code that tells it exactly what to do, and it has some triggers. So for instance, in Python, if you had a function called print hello, anytime you call print hello, it executes the code that was defined in the print hello function. Same thing here with Cloud Functions, where you could trigger these instead of calling the function like a normal function in Python. You call it through a bunch of things. This could be an HTTP request, so sending an online message. Another thing is the pub sub, which we'll get into later. Talk about that a lot. And this works really well that you can have these functions that exist that anytime you need to be run, you can say, hey, call it, and it will happen all in the background. You don't need to have your computer running to have it make sure it's set up. It's in the cloud. The cloud provider, in our case, Google Cloud, will deal with all of that as well. Another key term is serverless. Has anyone here heard of serverless? Can I raise a hand if you've heard of serverless before? All right, serverless doesn't actually mean there's no server. It's kind of an oxymoron in that case, where serverless just means that you don't notice the server, where there is a server somewhere in some data center, just you're not the one managing it. You just see an abstraction. So for instance, in the Cloud Functions, these functions are being executed on some computer somewhere in Arizona, wherever you've defined it. But you don't have to turn on the computer each time, or if the internet goes out there, you don't have to worry about that. It's always handled by the cloud provider. And that's the main idea of serverless, where all of this is being handled in the background where you don't have to worry about it. And so does anyone have any quick questions about Cloud Functions, how they work, or anything about cloud in general before we move on? All right, well, we'll move on. So these are just some generic overviews of these. We'll get some hands-on experience once we actually start on the project. So don't worry if these things don't make full sense. There's a lot of more details that we'll get onto. So PubSub, also known as Publisher Subscriber Network, works pretty similar to what you guys have heard of when it comes to, subscribing to your favorite YouTube channel. So anytime the YouTube channel, let's say Mr. Beast, posts a video, then if you're subscribed, you'll get notified of it. And so this works similarly in the cloud industry, where you can subscribe to a topic, and anytime anytime a message gets published to that topic, you'll be notified with that message. And so obviously, you don't necessarily need this to be going to you directly. You'd want this to be going to a different piece of your code. So if we look back into the Cloud Functions that I mentioned earlier, this is one way of triggering a Cloud Function. Let's say anytime you have an update to your database, you say, hey, I want to make sure there's no malicious things happening. So you do a clean sweep of your storage every time something new gets updated. So you can say, hey, anytime I see an update in our database, I am going to send a PubSub message to the storage cleaner topic. And the message is going to contain maybe the name of the file that just got added, changed, or deleted. And that way, that PubSub message, or that message will be sent to that topic, and there will exist maybe a Cloud Function that also is subscribed to that topic that'll see that message and will activate and start cleaning out that storage. Cool. Does anyone have any questions about how PubSub works and its integration with Cloud Functions? All right, this is gonna be a huge building point of our project later on. So you'll see a lot of different things where we'll have a Cloud Function that might even publish a message to another topic, which then is read by another Cloud function, and so forth. So we'll go ahead and play with that a little bit later. So today we'll be working on building our own web crawler. Does anyone here know what a web crawler, web spider is, or have heard of it before? Here, raise a hand. All right, so a little bit amount of you guys have heard of that. So a web crawler or web spider is essentially a computer program, a bot that searches. That's really all it is. Something that can go from website to website, whether doing some task, whether it's indexing it for Google search or memorizing all the information for training large language models. All these are used with web crawlers that jump from website to website. And so, like I mentioned, search engines like Google use web crawlers to be able to find different websites to recommend different things to the users. And so this is very helpful. And today we'll be building a web crawler that's able to go through different news articles and find things that it thinks that you would be interested in. So, like I mentioned, this is our project. There's kind of 4 main steps where we're going to go through and look at news articles. Say we have a starting point. In our case, it's going to be Fox News, simply because they don't have any blockers for web crawlers. A lot of news sites will have things to check that there are no computer programming's checking their sites. So if you've heard like Reddit, for instance, they now charge you an API to get access to Reddit information. Things like that will typically block web crawlers. So we'll be starting out with foxnews.com. So the web crawler will go through that site, find all the different news articles that were posted today. And with those, it'll get, let's say, a list of 100 news articles that exist on the main website. It'll then go ahead and read every single one, kind of classify them into different topics. So maybe there's an article on some basketball team whose player got injured. And so it'll read through that and be able to identify or give it a classification or label. So it says, hey, this news article that I found, it is about basketball. It is related to sports and maybe the whatever city that team is from. Once you have, we'll do that for every single article that's found. So it does that for all 100 or so articles. And it'll create that list and you'll be able to then match that up with a kind of a new subscriber list. So now this comes down to matching these articles with what your guys' preferences are. So you guys will be able to add your own preferences and your emails into this project. So for instance, you say, hey, I would like to get a daily email about anything that has to do with soccer news or things that have to do with video games or whatever your hobby may be. You would store that information. The bot would then identify, hey, I found an article about the sports team that you're interested in, and we'll take that and email you that article. So this way we have this entire thing from start to finish. For one, we start off at Fox News, automatically scan and look through all the news articles there and identify which ones the different users in our platform are interested in and email out those articles. Does anyone have any questions about kind of the overall goal of this project? Cool. Let's look into the actual architecture of this. So this will look a bit daunting at first. This is all the different pieces that are involved in this project. It's looks like a lot. Technically, if you wanted to, you could do this locally without half of these steps. But the main idea is these 5 different steps that I have here. Each of these 5 steps of the project are broken up into their own slide decks, which I have shared with you and we'll look at later. So each of these are broken up to 5 mini steps that you'll be working on with a team to accomplish. So the first step is you're going to need to build a 24-hour scheduler clock. This essentially is something that waits 24 hours and then sends a signal that says, okay, start the entire process. And that will then set up the entire Rube Goldberg machine, looking for new articles, scanning them, sending them out. Once the scheduler sends its message to a pub subtopic, we'll then go to the second part. That's our URL scraper. That will go to start at Fox News and identify all the different URLs and links to other news articles from there. It'll create a partial list of, let's say, 100 or so articles, and we'll pass that through PubSub again to our text scraper and content classifier. The content classifier is a natural language processing or NLP API that will read all the text from an article and be able to label it with different topics. So that's where we're able to identify this is a sports article about basketball with this home team. Something like that. That's the main idea of step 3. Step 4 is when we connect those topics to users. So if you guys remember, I mentioned that, hey, if you're interested in all news related to sports, you can put that into our cloud storage. It'll read that and identify to see, is there any articles that we just looked at that match your interests? If so, we pass it on to step 5. Step 5 is where we email it to your email. So hopefully by the end of this, every day you'll get an email, or in my case, like 30 emails about the different news articles that the program thinks you are interested in based off of what you've selected. Well, does anyone have any questions about the overarching architecture of this platform? Cool. All right, so how this will work is we'll go into groups of, I think, groups of 3. And so if you could split up the groups of 3, that'd be great. And then we'll work on the next 2 steps together, and then you can go off and do it on your own. So you can go ahead, squeeze together if you find 2 other people that you want to work on this with, and we'll come back together in a couple minutes. right, cool. Now that we all have groups, I think there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups. This will have some fun. Can you guys all please make a team name? This is how we're going to differentiate all the different modules from one another, because it'd kind of be problematic if two groups accidentally use each other's resources. That might cause some issues. So if you can go ahead, talk amongst yourself, come up with a team name, and yell it out once we've all come back together again. So I'll give you guys about a minute to come up with a team name. Hopefully that's enough. All right, cool. Does any team not have a name yet? All right. Well, I'll go around, and if you have your team name, please shout it out. So what's over here? What's your guys' team name? Ram. Okay. So anytime you see something in the project that says enter team name, enter Ram. How about up here in the front? Shout something out, random. All right, we'll circle back. The second row. What's your team name? Pizza Callers. Okay, is that to say right? Crawlers. Okay, great. That sounds amazing. All right, next group, third row. What is your name? Basketball. Okay, I'm seeing a trend. All right, in the back, what's your team name? Say again? Team 5. There's always that one group that just names herself off the number I give them. All right, sure. All right, in the front, have you guys come up with anything? Say again? Pad Thai. Okay, sure. So for those groups, anytime you make resources, make sure your team name is in the resource name or the module name. So for instance, if you create a cloud function, make sure your team name is somewhere in the name of that module, which will be very obvious once we go through these. Additionally, we will be making, each group will be creating, there'll be one instance per group. So for instance, if a task says create a cloud function, there will only need to be one cloud function for your entire group. You don't each need to make one. And there should be about like 10 or so different instances they'll be creating. Just to split up the work, I suggest maybe the first person works on the first slide deck, then you rotate the next person in charge on the second slide deck, and you keep going. You can split up the work however you would like. Again, this is supposed to be collaboratory. You would work together on all this. All right, cool. Let's go on to the actual project. So if everyone can go to the link up here, tinyurl.com/gdsc-gcp-web crawler. This will bring you to the Google Cloud Platform homepage under the GDSC project. If it doesn't work, make sure you're signed in to your UCSC account as it is shared with them. A cloud project is defined as an environment under a single billing account. So essentially, everything that you're doing here is funded by us through a free trial. But yeah, so all the work we'll be doing is going to be through that dashboard, which is the top link there. So if that doesn't work for you guys, again, first check to see if you're on your UCSC account. If it still doesn't show that you have access to it, raise your hand and we'll have people walk around and help you throughout. All right, the second part, all of our instructions, like I mentioned, will be on slide decks, which can be found in this link here. This will be a Google Drive link that contains, I think, all 5 of our slide decks. Again, if you don't have access to it, make sure that you check that you're on your UCSC account. So let's go ahead and open up those on my end. So if you click on the top link, you should see something like this. Does everyone see something like this? Can I get thumbs up if you see something like this? Perfect. And then the second link, click on that. That should get you something like this. Yes, you should see all 5 plus the intro slide deck. All right, cool. So I'm going to use 2 screens. I'll have the Cloud Console up on the main screen and the instructions off on the second screen. If you guys want, you guys can just tab between them, or if you have a big laptop, you can do it side by side. I saw a hand back there. Is there a question? Yes. Right here. And if you want, you can just go to this one. This link right here will have links to this slide plus all the other instructional slides that we'll get to eventually. All right. I think we can go ahead and get started. So as you see here, this is our cloud dashboard. So it has a bunch of our different services we can see here and go ahead and find all the things that we'll be needing for this project that we'll do. All right. So we're going to start off with Web Crawler Scheduler 1. This is that first slide deck that we have here. So go ahead and open that up, and you should see something like this. This is for setting up our 24-hour cloud scheduler. So if you remember back to the original computer or project architecture, this is the first step in it. That is building the 24-hour scheduler. So every 24 hours, it starts the whole process. So I'm going to go ahead and move that over to my right monitor and have them up at the same time because I'll be referring to both of them constantly. So let's go ahead and get started. So Cloud Scheduler. I've already described a little bit about what this is, but it is a trigger. It's a cloud module that triggers at every certain allotted time. You could choose however you want. I suggest a default of 24 hours. If for whatever reason you want to be notified every hour of a bunch of news articles that you want, you can also select it like that. And so anytime you've set it to trigger, it'll trigger some form of cloud module. In our case, you can do pub sub, or if you want, you can play around with HTTP requests, or you can see how that gets incorporated into your code a bit later. So let's go look through the different goals of this slide deck. So there are 4 main things. One, we want to set up our cloud scheduler, have it trigger every 24 hours. When it hits that time point, we want to publish a message to our URL crawler topic, which is a pub subtopic, which we'll get into later. And that message will contain our starting URL. In our case, it's Fox News. You are free to try other websites, but they might be formatted differently or have different URL blockers that prevent web crawlers from working on it. So let's go get started. How do we actually get to the cloud scheduler? Well, we go ahead to our navigation menu, which is the little hamburgers on the top of the screen here. Let me zoom in so you guys can see it better. So let's open up our navigation menu, and we should see a lot of these different products that the Google Cloud Platform has to offer. You can go ahead and play with any of these as you like, but for right now, we'll be creating a cloud scheduler instance. So let's go ahead and scroll down. Make sure you open up the more products, and you should eventually see the cloud scheduler under integration services. Right here. So I'm under integration services. I see cloud scheduler, and I can go ahead and click it, and it'll open up the cloud scheduler instances. Go ahead and ignore all these practice ones. And we would like to create our instance. We could do so at the very top by creating a job. So again, we only want to create one of these instances per team. So go ahead and select whichever team member is going to be working on this slide deck to start off with. And you guys can rotate later. All right, so once we're on this page, we can go ahead and create job.
So just really quickly, a few people walked in, so it looks like we're doing groups of 4. So if you just walked in, I think you're sitting right behind a group of 3, so just feel free to join them. And then just kind of follow what they're doing, because all of you are going to be doing a separate part of the web crawler, but you'll need the same team name. So
All right, so once you've clicked create a job, you'll be shown this screen, which will show you all the different things that we can play around with for our cloud scheduler. Let's go ahead in the next slide on our slide deck, and we can go ahead and start filling out this information. So the first item is the name. This is what name should we give our scheduler? In this case, I suggest everyone keep a consistent naming scheme. So for instance, I'll use 24 scheduler and then my team name. I'll call this I am DSC. That's my team name. So for I think one of you guys were Rams. So for you guys would be 24-scheduler-Rams. For region, you can select whichever region you want, keeping it default as Iowa works just as fine. So this is basically where the data center that all of your cloud instances will be working on. So there's some data center, I guess, in Iowa that will be hosting all of our information. If you want, again, you can play around with other ones you see here as well. For description, you just describe what your scheduler is doing. You don't really have to put anything here. It's an optional one. I'm just going to leave it blank for now. So frequency. So the way that frequency works is it's the Unix cron format. I'm sure everyone has heard of the Unix cron format, of course, right? Well, the way that the Unix cron format works is it's 5 pieces of information that will identify frequency of when you want something to trigger. So for instance, it is separated by spaces. So the first instance in the Unix cron format represents the minute. So what minute of the day do we want this to trigger at? Well, in our case, let's have it trigger at 5 p.m. every single day. So can someone tell me what minute is 5 p.m.? This is a number 0 to 59. What minute is represented with 5 p.m.? Your hint is 5:00. What's the minute at 5 p.m.? Exactly 0. So because we want to happen at exactly 5 o'clock, our minute would be 0. If we want to happen at 5:05, we would put a 5 for our minutes. So we have our 0, we do space. So now we're on our second digit. This is our hour. What hour do you want to put in the 24-hour time? In our case, 5 p.m. Does anyone know what 5 p.m. is in 24-hour schedule or 24-hour? 70? 17, yes. It's 17 because it's 12 hours plus 5 because we're doing PM instead of AM. So our second value would be 17. Next is the day of the month. So it says, hey, do we want to trigger on the 1st of every month, the 2nd of every month? Well, in our case, we want to happen every single day. So because it's every single one of these days of the month, we'll use an asterisk to represent every single one of the days. The next category is what month do we want this to trigger in? Again, because we're triggering this every single day, regardless of the month, we're also going to want to put an asterisk here as well. So this says, now the 5th category is the day of the week. We want this to be happening specifically on a Sunday or Saturdays. We don't particularly care unless you want to play around with it. We'll also say every day of the week, we don't care. So that's also an asterisk here. So it should display here the min hour at 5 p.m. every single day. Also, if you want throughout this process, go ahead and grab some more pizza. I think we have plenty, and go ahead and get up. Yes. Are you signed into your UCSC account? Oh. Try the URL again. What is this URL? Try again. It seems like you're signed into a different project.
I'll just open this.
Can we try it incognito and then you can sign in there? I'm sure, can you help them? All right, she'll help with that. All right, let's continue on. So the next part is the time zone. In our case, we want to use the Pacific Daylight Time Zone. So you can, I think it says search by country, in our case, United States. And from there, we can go ahead and select Pacific Standard or Pacific Daylight Time. My bad. Did I pass that up? I did. I missed it. Pacific, oh, right here. Pacific Daylight Time. Again, if you want, you can select a different time zone. Not sure why you would want to use Eastern time zone, but you can select that here. From here, we have now defined our scheduler with all of our relevant information. Again, make sure your name contains your team name that you have discussed with your team, because that will be useful for later on. Let's go ahead and continue. So now we want to configure the execution or what this scheduler will trigger each time. In our case, we want to have it trigger a pub sub topic. We want to send a message to a specific topic, which will then trigger the next function in the list. So in our case, we want to set the target type to be pub sub. And so from here, let's go ahead and create a new topic. This topic can be edited here. Let's go to the next slide to show what different things we can do with this. So in our case, our topic name should be scheduler dash and then the team name that you guys have selected. So in my case, mine will just be scheduler dash DSC. Once you've had that as your topic ID, go ahead and click create. You can leave everything else here as default values. Again, if you ever fall behind, you can use the slide decks provided, as long as you're following along, making sure you're reading all the different bullet points, checking the images to make sure you're doing everything. You should be set. And if you still are lost, feel free to raise your hand. I can answer it, or we can have someone walk around and help out with that as well. So from here, we now have our correct topic selected, and we want to now send a certain message to our message body. In this case, we aren't going to be using the message body specifically. Instead, we'll be using attributes. So you can just add some random gibberish here. I'm just going to say message body is not being used. So instead of using the message body, we'll be using message attributes. These are key value pairs. Has anyone here used dictionaries in Python, or what is it in C++ and C? Hash maps, yes, those. This is pretty much identical to all those listed before, where you have a different key and value. In our case, we need to have a way of storing the starting URL. So our key will be URL, and our value will be our starting URL. In our case, we'll be using Fox News as our starting point for our web scraper. Make sure you have typed all this correctly. So this would be https www.foxnews.com / Make sure it's typed exactly like this. Otherwise, you might have some problems later on. So again, one of the most common problems you'll see if there's ever an error is you got to look back. There's some typo, randomly a period ended up somewhere, or something is misspelled. That's usually the biggest mistakes when we do these type of projects. Once we've added our message attribute, our cloud scheduler is complete, and we can go ahead and create our instance. So go to the bottom left and click create. And this will go ahead and deploy the scheduler that says, hey, anytime it hits 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, I will trigger this new cloud pub subtopic. So if you want, you guys don't have to do this. I'm just showing you, for instance, you can go ahead and scroll all the way down to where pub sub is in our navigation menu to see our new topic that we just created. What? Yeah. Just a reminder, you are creating only one scheduler per team. So if we go to our pub sub, again, you guys don't have to do this. I'm just showing this. You should be able to scroll down and see the scheduler I just created. In my case, I have a scheduler -DSC. I see another one, scheduler HRAM. I assume that's this group right here. And every group should be able to see one of their schedulers here. Again, however you spelt it here, make sure you remember that for future parts, because we will be using these topics to trigger other cloud functions, which we'll get into in a sec. All right. And just like that, we've created our first module of the project. This is our 24-hour cloud scheduler. And so these are type of the slide deck lengths that we'll be expecting. This is just the first one. I'll go through one more of it so that we can all do it together. And then I'll send you off on to have you guys do it on your own pace, walk around and help you guys with that. So once you've completed that, you can go to the final page and it'll have a link to the next slide. So we finished this slide deck, which is the cloud scheduler. And now we can move on to the URL scraper. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide deck here. All right, so because we're only creating one instance per group, I suggest now you switch whoever is creating instances to the next person in your group. All right, can I get a thumbs up if you're on to the next slide deck, creating a URL scraper with Cloud Functions? Can I get a thumbs up if you're on this page? I'm not seeing very many thumbs up. Can you check how everyone's doing? Does anybody need help? If so, please raise your hand. Okay, thumbs up. I see thumbs up from this group. I don't. You guys are pad thai. You guys are. Can I get thumbs up from everyone if you guys are ready to move on to the second part of the web crawler project? You should be on the slide deck that we're on here, creating a URL scraper with Cloud Functions. Again, the link to it is going to be at the end of the previous slide deck and can also be found in our Google Drive with all of our slides. Anybody cannot find this slide deck? All right, cool. Let's go ahead and continue moving on. So this is the second part of the project. This is where we are going to be doing the URL scraper. We already went through Cloud Functions. This is just a little reiteration for those that missed it. You guys can go read through that slide on your own. And the goal for this part of the project is to set up a Cloud Function that is triggered on that pub sub message. This is the exact same pub sub topic that we created in that previous slide deck with the scheduler. So when that scheduler activates, we want to trigger this new Cloud Function. Once it gets triggered, we want to go through that original URL, so in our case, Fox News, and find all the different URLs to other articles. From there, we want to publish those articles to the next topic. So we can kind of like do an assembly line where we go from one block to the next. So we are at the URL scraper, and we'll be passing off all the new articles to the next topic, which will set up the next Cloud Function. So let's go ahead and navigate to pub sub. Because we're going to be creating a new topic, we'll do this through the dashboard. So go to the navigation menu on the top left, scroll down, should be pretty far down until you get to pub/sub. I think that is under analytics. So you should see pub/sub. Go ahead and click that. And you should see a lot of different pub sub topics that I've created and I've practiced with in the past. So you should see a bunch of different ones. And if you want, you should even be able to see the topic that you guys have just created. In our case, let's go ahead and create a new pub subtopic and name it with your new team name. In this case, this is going to be the topic that your URL parser will then send the articles to. So let's go ahead and name it. In this case, we're going to call it URL parser. I can't type. I have to close this. All right, so the topic ID is URL parser, and then our team name. In my case, I think my team name I said was DSC. So again, whatever your team name is here, make sure you include that in your topic ID. And again, leave everything here as the default values. So we can go ahead and click create. So now we have two topics. We have our scheduler topic and our URL parser topic. The scheduler topic will trigger our URL scraper. Our URL scraper will publish a message to our URL parser pub subtopic. All right, from here, let's go ahead on to the next slide. So now we want to go ahead and create a Cloud Function that will get triggered by our original topic. So again, go to the navigation menu and scroll down to Cloud Functions, which should be under the serverless category. So you see here, we should find the Cloud Function field. Now it'll bring us to the Cloud Function page, and we can go ahead and create a new Cloud Function, which is here at the top. We can go ahead and create a new function from here. Again, move on to the next slide and let's go ahead and change all of it. Let's configure our function. So the first part is the environment. I haven't actually tried this with second gen. I've tested that it works with the first gen function formatting. So I suggest everyone select the first gen for your environment. Additionally, make sure you set your function name to follow the same format that we did before. So this is our URL scraper. So URL-scraper and then the team name. In my case, DSC. Whatever your team name is, add it here as well. Like I mentioned before, the region, you guys can select any region you want. I'm going to keep it default. So the data set that's hosting our cloud function will be in Iowa. So now our trigger. As we mentioned before, cloud functions need to have some trigger so it knows when to start executing the code. Our trigger will be a pub subtopic, which is going to be the topic that we have declared in our scheduler. So you should go ahead and be able to select your scheduler topic. So mine should be called scheduler-DSC. In your case, your guys should be scheduler- whatever your team name is. So you hopefully should be able to find it when selecting pub sub and then that's selecting the topic next section. Once you've done that, let's go ahead and press save and we can move on to the next step. So at the very bottom, go ahead and click next. You don't have to worry about runtime, build connections, and security settings. So from here, we now have a very basic code editor. Right now, the runtime is set to Node.js 20. Personally, I don't know Node.js. If you do, more power to you. But in our case, we'll be using Python 3.9. I suggest everyone swap over to Python 3.9 because that's what it's already coded in. And unless you want to figure out how to code everything from scratch, I suggest you also join in swapping to Python 3.9. So in our case, we are going to be looking at the main.py script. As we see here, this is just default information. We don't need any of this. We can go ahead and delete it all for now. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. So the URL scraper works by scraping HTML from a website. So it will read the website as a bunch of HTML code, which will be then transferred into a string formatting. From there, we want to be able to look through that string and identify any URLs. If you've seen HTML before, you may know what this looks like. Again, I'll go show you what that looks like in a bit. And once we've found all those URLs, we're going to want to publish that list to the next topic and continue on with the project. So what is HTML? Who here's heard of HTML? Let's do a quick raise of hands with that. All right, so the majority of you guys heard of HTML before, so I can go quickly through this. So HTML, hypertext markup language. It helps to structure and tell a computer or a DOM how you want to display your page. And so there's a bunch of different tags and attributes that give a little bit of information about what type of text everything is. So if you want, you can check all the tags here. Again, you have access to all this, so you can review this on your own time. And here's a little example of some HTML and the image it would generate. So we can look at all the tags. The tags are in red, and we can identify, hey, there is a link within this web page. And we notice that, hey, anytime we see the letters A and href as a tag, that defines a link or a URL that we probably want to look for. So for our scraper, we'll go ahead and download it as a string and identify, hey, anytime we see the href tag, that means there must be a URL for us to parse. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and code our page scraper. All the code you'll need for this project is going to be in the slides. You just have to copy and paste. You shouldn't have to type anything except for things that say add your team name here. So let's go ahead and look at this code here. I'm not going to go too in depth into it. It mainly goes through downloads the HTML from our URL, identifies the tag that contains the URLs, copies all of that, and then returns it as an array of URLs, which you can see here as an example. Notice how a lot of them aren't actually usable, a lot of incomplete tabs that don't really give us any information or income. But that's just the first step. Let's go ahead and copy all of that into our Cloud Function code editor. So if we see here, left, we've now copy pasted everything from the slide deck. Don't worry about editing it. It should all be right for you to copy paste. So that will then collect all of our URLs that we need, and we go move on to the next step. The next slide, now we have to build a URL filter. As we saw before in the previous slide, not all the URLs it finds are usable. So some of them might be mailing emails. You don't want any emails. Additionally, some of the emails are going to be incomplete. So for instance, when we're on Fox News page, it'll just have the suffix. It won't give you the prefix, so we might have to add the prefix to our URL. So you have to do all those different filtering techniques, which will be on that next slide. So go ahead and copy our filter function code and paste it in our code editor here. Again, make sure that when you paste it, that the indentation is correct. You don't want your code to be indented improperly. That will cause errors later on. Let's continue on to the next part. So now we want to be able to publish all of our URLs. Now that we've found the URLs that contain articles, let's go ahead and pass it on to the next step. So we have here the next set of Python code that will be able to send all of those links to the next Cloud function or send it to that a new pub subtopic. All right. Another thing to mention, notice how we have URL parser -t name highlighted. This is where you replace that with the topic name that you have already created. So in my case, I would replace URL parser -t name with URL -parser -dsc for you guys, whatever your team name may be. So again, makes this is important that you guys type this out correctly. We'll go ahead and copy this, and we can go ahead and add it to our code base. Then I need to make sure to change team name to my team name. In my case, it is DSC. So from here, we can move on to the next slide. Again, if you want to understand more about this code, come talk to me afterwards. I'm more than happy to go explain what all these different lines of code is for. So now let's go ahead and put this all together. So we want to first identify our entry point. This is kind of like, what's our main function? When this Cloud function gets called, how does it know what to do? We need to have that entry point or that main function. So let's go ahead and code that. So our entry point is going to be the URL parser function at the bottom of our slide deck. You can go ahead and paste that into our code editor. Again, make sure indentation is correct. So now we have the URL parser. This will read our trigger message. This will be Fox News as our starter URL. And then it will send it to the initial parser. Once we have the array of links, we can send it to our filter function. And from there, we can go ahead and publish all of those links. Again, make sure you have all that copy pasted. And it should look something like the picture on the right. It might not look identical, but something around there. And we have to then make sure we update our entry point. Again, the entry point identifies which of these functions should be called when we trigger the Cloud function. So in our case, we want to make sure URL parser is our entry point. So make sure to edit it at the top to be URL_parser. Here, we have completed our main.py for our URL parser. However, if you notice, we have imported some things that we probably don't have in base Python. For instance, pub sub v1 is not something we have by default. Same thing with beautiful soup, which is very important for parsing HTML. Well, we have to pip install those types of things. And how do we pip install it? Well, we make sure that we update our requirements.txt. This is the file here on the left. Notice how we have main.py and requirements.txt. Go ahead and select requirements.txt. And this is where we can add all of our packages that we need to pip install. So go ahead and copy paste all the ones we have on our slide deck and paste it here. So we should have requests with a version greater than or equal to 2.7.0, Google Cloud Pub Sub that's greater than or equal to 2.6.1, and Beautiful Soup 4 that's greater than or equal to 4.9.0. Those are different versions we need of those packages. Once we have all that set up, do a quick double check that nothing looks extremely off. Check that all of our function definitions are indented correctly, and go ahead and click deploy. And if everything has been set up correctly, we shouldn't get any errors. So far, no errors, and it will take a little bit of time to deploy. So right now, this is all getting compiled and happening in the background on Google's data centers. So if you have any errors, raise your hand, or you can try to work it out with your group what might have gone wrong. But this should take about, I think, 30 seconds or so, 30 seconds to a minute to get set up. So once this gets set up, we can go ahead and test to see that our scraper is doing what it's meant to be doing. And you will know that it's set up if this I don't know what you call this, loading circle bar is a green check mark. It'll be very obvious. See, right now, it says function is active. That means it correctly deployed. If you see some error again, please raise your hand. We're happy to help fix it. Typically, again, has to do with typing. All right, so once our function is active, we can go ahead and test to make sure that it is working. So we can go ahead and move over to the logs tab of our cloud function. Obviously, you shouldn't see very much because we haven't really done much with our cloud function. We have never called it yet. So let's go ahead and trigger it. The way we can go ahead and trigger it is by going back to our cloud scheduler. So if you want, go back to the navigation menu. Again, scroll down to Cloud Scheduler, which I think is pretty far down. Right here, I'm just going to open this up in a new tab, just to have them side by side. So from here, once you go to the Cloud Scheduler, go ahead and find the schedule that you guys created. In my case, it is the schedule 24scheduler-DSC. And go to all the way to the right, and you can select the 3 dots. And from here, you should see a force run button. This will simulate what happens anytime it has hit, in my case, 5 p.m. So I can go ahead and click force run. Hypothetically, this will publish a message to our scheduler topic. When our cloud function sees, hey, a message has been published to the scheduler topic, the cloud function will trigger and we'll then be able to find a bunch of different URLs. So let's go ahead and see if this has worked in our function. Go ahead and refresh, and boom, we should see a whole lot of logs we see here. In this case, you can see all the different links that we have found here. It says published link. There's one on US-China trade tensions escalate, surging production of electric vehicles. And you can go ahead and scroll and see all the different links that it has set up, found for you as well. This is also a really good way of identifying errors. So far, all these are just console messages, which are really nice. But if you see an error, sometimes you can ignore the errors. Sometimes it'll give you insight as to why something's been broken. So if you scroll all the way to the bottom, hopefully you guys should see this message that says function executed, took however amount of time. In my case, this took 9,000 milliseconds or 9 seconds to do, and it finished with status OK, which means it worked properly. And just like that, we have finished setting up our URL parser. Does anyone have any questions about the URL parser so far, or anything that we've done up to this point? Yes. The logs. So when you're in the cloud, so if you go to the main cloud functions page, you should see a list of all the different cloud functions, right? Go ahead and find the cloud function that you guys created. In my case, it's the one right here, URL scraper DSC. Select that, and you should see a bunch of tabs at the top. In our case, we're going to be looking at the cloud function logs, which you should be able to see up here as one of the headers. Select that, and you should see all the logs. If it looks blank and you triggered it, try to refresh the logs, and you should see it pop up. Does anyone else have any questions before we kind of move on to everyone going their own pace? All right. Cool. I got a thumbs up, thumbs middle, thumbs down about how we're feeling so far. Are we feeling good pacing? Is it too hard? How are we feeling about this? We got thumbs up, thumbs middle, thumbs down about how we're feeling. Cool. I see a good amount of thumbs up. All right, great. So we've just finished the first and second parts of our web crawler. The next 3 parts, so the text scraper, which is the content classifier, our interest matcher, and our emailer are all parts for you guys to work on for the next, I think, hour until we hit the 8 p.m. So you can find the next slide decks with all those instructions at the end of the slides. In this case, you can find them here and additionally in our Google Drive that we've shared earlier. And from there, you guys can go on and continue to part 3 of our workshop. Again, you guys can now work at your own pace, and I will be concluding the me lecturing and talking to you part, which hopefully will give you guys some nice breathing room to have fun and talk with your group mates. Yeah. And for those of you watching online, thank you. This will be more time for independent work.